Hello, everyone. This is Tracy's Tuesday Talks. I am your hostess, Tracy Latono with Golden Rose Financial Coaching, and I have a very special guest with me, John Heck, who is an estate planner, and he is going to debunk some myths, dig into why it's important to have a plan to leave your legacy and how to care for your family afterwards, and really dig into his heart about why he does what he does. So John, introduce yourself and tell us about what brought you into estate planning.
No, yeah, thanks, Tracy. Look, I really appreciate your time and thanks for asking me to kind of be part of your world here for a short time. I love this work. My name is John Heck. I'm an Air Force retiree and an attorney. I work out of the Northern Virginia, DC area as an estate planner, and that's kind of all I do. Um, uh, Kind of what brought me to this work was honestly the military. When I was back as a brand new kind of commissioned lieutenant, kind of young guy, and then I had my first deployment, and they put me in this deployment line. They said, okay, make sure all your medical's done, make sure your folder's ready. Oh, and don't forget to sign your power of attorney and your will. So you're signing that. And it was just part of a processing line where they just churn out the documents. And I got this sense like I'm signing something important and I have no idea what I just signed. Right. I know it matters, I'm sure, because what if I get killed in combat kind of thing or maimed or whatever, but I did it anyway. And then I kind of just, one of those that stuck with me for kind of my whole career, really, about what does that really mean? And then over the course of your career, I did a few more of those. It would update the documents, that kind of thing. Then I went to the JAG plans. And through about the, 25, 30 years, I really still didn't know what I was signing. And I'd gone to law school at that point, did it at night while working during the day. But then I got a little personal because then I got married and then I had a daughter and then I had some babies. And I said, I kind of need to know what's going to happen if I'm not around. And oh, by the way, I'm a lawyer and I've been licensed for a while, and let's really dig into this thing so I could use my law degree. And I started doing a lot of research on it, and I've always been interested in it. But the more I read as a lawyer, and that time I was finishing my military service, not as a JAG, but just through the military. And I just kept studying and studying. And the more I read about it, the more it really kind of resonated with me. And the more I realized kind of how important it is. So just some basic numbers, roughly two thirds, it depends on what study you look at. About 60% of Americans have no estate plan, none, like at all. And then of those that do, a lot of them did kind of LegalZoom, kind of had a robot do it. Maybe they bought some software at Costco. So even if the documents are legally valid, they still don't know what they actually do. So they're still kind of unprepared. And so families at the worst possible time get into this crunch of, I had mom or dad said they took care of it, and yet I'm still here in probate. I'm still here in court. I don't understand why what's going on. I thought it was done. And of course, again, it's the worst possible time to go through all that stuff. Right. And I knew that I could use my law degree as a tool to help families avoid that. And that's really why I opened this office and founded Legacy Lawyers. Their piece, and this in the name, but this idea of legacy, which is more than just a legal plan that accomplishes distribution of your assets and your life's work. But a couple of numbers that I learned that surprised me. The average inheritance is gone in 18 months.
I believe it.
So people, because when you dump a bunch of money on people, they spend it, they don't save it. So imagine you spent 50 years to save for your kids. You kind of give it to them through an inheritance, or if you don't have a plan, probate court will distribute it, and then it's gone in a year and a half, right? Any wealth can be squandered. So I was like, how is that really the legacy I would want? Right. And how can I do better? And I learned about how you can create a series of trusts that will in fact stop that and help your kids get educated if you're not there to do it yourself. Help your kids become responsible citizens if you can't do it yourself. And to me, that was a really powerful message, right? Like why you wouldn't want to give an inheritance outright, why you'd want to space it out and build in time for them to learn how to invest it, how to grow it, and how to develop a work ethic that allowed you to get that similar kind of wealth, right? And then this idea of memorializing who we are beyond just a legal document also really resonated as well. Again, because as a parent and as in the military, and the military part just beat service into my head, so it's all about serving others. And so I'm going to keep my own family there, but also help other families on a more personal level.
Yeah.
So it's really across, it's just a great way to use a law degree and a bar license, to really help families do that.
Thanks for getting into that. So you kind of touched on some really interesting points, like the average inheritance being gone in a year and a half. Like I'm not surprised, and at the same time, like that just blows my mind, boggles my mind.
Right.
Well, mainly because like 78% of households are still living paycheck to paycheck. 80% of people like don't have a budget or have a plan for their finances. So when you mentioned spacing the inheritance out, so it's not just blown in
Right.
18 months. That sounds like that's more of a trust. So what's the difference between a simple will and a trust?
Yeah, that's a great distinction. And a lot of people don't understand that. Again, through no fault of their own. I mean, even like recent TV shows and movies talk about the reading of the will and this will and the will and the will. And so it's kind of part of our culture of the will is your plan. When in reality, the will is probably the least important part of your plan. Because here's all a will does. So of that group of 60% roughly Americans that have no plan, they actually all have a plan, because you know why? Someone's got to give away your stuff if you're not around to give it away. And that someone is the government.
Oh,
Now,
no, thank you.
the government won't take it and keep it. They will eventually, if you can't figure out, they can't figure out who owns it, eventually they'll just keep it. But that process of giving away your stuff if you're gone is the government. That government is a courthouse. That courthouse system is called probate. Probably a lot of your viewers have experience with probate through family members, right? All probate says is, well, they didn't have a plan. Someone's got to give their stuff away. We're going to assume they would have given it to their spouse and kids, for instance. So we're just going to do that. But it's public. It takes a year. If you owe debts, your creditors can see it because it's public again. They can file lawsuits against your estate. It's lengthy. It can be contentious, all those things, right? But remember, probate only can do that to what you own. If you don't own it, it does not go to probate. For instance, if I have a life insurance policy and my life insurance policy says, give my wife this money when I die. Well, that's not going to go to probate, because why would it? The court already would know who I give it to. I've already said that in advance, right?
Yeah.
So a trust is the similar thing. A trust is essentially a contract that you write with yourself that says, okay, upon my death, this entity that I've created called a trust, the trust owns everything at the moment of my death. The trust now owns everything. I don't. So you can use it as a beneficiary designation. You could say my trust is a beneficiary. You can title your house, for instance, into your trust right now while you're alive. Why would I do that? I'm giving up ownership. Not really, because your trust is yourself while you're alive, right? Yeah, you're alive. So you can still change it. It doesn't really change anything day to day. So, but if it's in the name of my trust and I'm gone, then I read the trust, and the trust says, here's how I give all my stuff out.
Yeah. So is there a designated trustee who's in charge of giving all that stuff out?
That's right. And a trustee is exactly that person. That's the fiduciary. So it's a pretty important role, because if you mess it up, there are penalties, prison time for trustees that try to abscond with the trust funds, that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But that trustee will have to follow what's in the trust. But one of the beautiful things of a trust is, because the trust owns it at the moment of death, I didn't. And if I don't own it, it doesn't go through probate. Because again, the probate court would say, well, we can't divide it under our government plan because the trust already owned it. And so the trust will do that for us, right? So that's the beauty of a trust. So they say, well, what about that will? You were just kind of trash talking, right? Well, all the will does is goes to a probate court or a probate judge, and they read the will and they say, okay, instead of the government plan, we're going to use their plan, which is in this will. But it still goes through probate. It still only covers what you own. But like the government plan, for instance, would not give to charity. So if you wanted to give to charity, you put it in your will. Then they would say, okay, yeah, under our statutes and our laws, we would give the money this way or the assets this way, but they wanted to give some to charity, so we're going to do that too. But why does a will go to probate? Every will, where there's a will, there's a probate, because people forge wills.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
People lie. People get around grandma on her deathbed and say, hey, sign this will so I get everything. So you have to have two witnesses. You have to be of sound mind. Those witnesses have to testify if there's disputed. And there's plenty of stories where wills were contested. I do a lot of celebrity estate presentations. And Larry King, this happened to him because he was in the process of divorcing his wife when he got sick, and his kids, when he was in the hospital, had him sign, they requested he sign another will. Then he passed away. So what's his wife say? That will's not valid. He was undrugged. He was whatever. I get everything.
Yeah.
So all wills go through probate. So why would the will then be the least important document? Because if you have a trust plan, there's nothing for a will to control because you didn't own anything when you died. A will, just like anything else, controls what you own when you die.
Yeah.
A trust would own it, so it would stay private and all get accomplished. And so the will would just be there for a really historical record.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would admit it to probate as a historical document. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So is there like a big difference in cost in setting up a will or a trust, or is that something that people should just come talk to you about?
well, yeah, the trust is going to be a little more expensive because you can layer trusts. There are a lot of different kinds of trusts. There's revocable and irrevocable. There's trusts that protect your assets while you're alive. There's trusts that protect life insurance that can feed into your estate. There's a lot of different types of trust because it's a contract. So you can be creative kind of in how you write it. So trusts tend to be more complex, right? Um, and if it's just a will, even I've had clients like, well, you're too expensive, whatever. And our fees, by the way, are in line with the industry. So we're not too expensive. But anyway, but the trust will cost more. But I say if all you're after is a will, and I've had some clients where they're like, yeah, we got it. We understand probate. We know it's going to take a year for our kids to get anything, at a minimum a year, probably two. And we're okay with that. Then all they need is a will, and that's less expensive. A good estate plan will include much, much more than just a will.
Mm-hmm.
I also tell them that, like, well, I just need a will. I get this call. I just need a will. I just need a will. Okay, what are you trying to accomplish? And what about if you're incapacitated? Because a will only happens if you die.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to make your medical decisions in the hospital? We ask those questions. But again, if all you really want's a will, and you're in the military, go get a will at the JAG. It's free.
Yeah.
Don't hire me. If all you want's a document, that one document, then you can go online. Like Costco this week has a sale for $40 off their will maker software. Now
They've
that,
got everything, don't they?
yeah, I know, right? I'm like, yeah. But then I also look, I was laughing because like Susie Orman, and I love the Susie Ormans of the world because they really do educate a lot of people, but they're not estate planning lawyers.
Yeah.
And so like Susie Orman has this estate plan where you get the 4 documents and all of them are based on the laws of California.
Yeah.
So if you live in California, you're great. But if you live in Kansas, maybe not so great to use Susie Orman's California plan. And those are the kinds of things I just say, be careful if you're doing it yourself. Because a lot of these do-it-yourself plans will fail. And this is the one thing you don't want to fail.
Yeah.
Because you've got grieving family members, all that. Yeah.
There's another Ramsey coach that I'm friends with, and he's getting ready to take his bar exam today, actually.
Oh, really?
And he is, bless his heart, he's constantly like, those online will forms, blah, 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 blah. Like he goes off on them. It's like, have a real human being ask you the questions, get to know you, because
Exactly.
they're going to know how to guide you through your situation. They're going to ask you, what legacy do you want to leave? How do you want this to be dispersed to your kids? Because there's some responsible kids and there's some really irresponsible kids.
Exactly.
And just having somebody walk alongside of you and guide you through it and help you figure out what's best for you versus a piece of software that's a robot.
And that's really what I do. And a large part of what I do. And there is some work for the clients because they have to give me all of their assets. Like, not like obviously give it to me personally, but they have to give me the list because I want to see what their estate looks like because we're going to do a personalized plan for them and their families.
Yeah.
Right. So for instance, a blended family will have different needs than a blended family with younger or minor children will have different needs than a retired couple in their 70s where the kids are all gone. Right. Or maybe they did a plan 20 years ago and now the kids are all grown and they need a different plan because their life has changed. Maybe they did a plan 20 years ago and the law is different. Right. Because the laws change all the time. The laws change all the time. Yeah. So we want to look at that and we want to look at, will their plan still accomplish the result? So it's really part of the way I think a good estate planner will do things as a lawyer is they always focus on the outcome for the client.
Yeah.
And not on the legal documents. The documents are required, of course, but they're a vehicle to get an outcome and a result. Yeah. Right. And I would argue for families, it's probably the most important result they'll ever have because it's really their legacy and it can go 100 years. Yeah. You could do a good plan, it'll last you generations to do it the right way. So.
And that's my goal as a financial coach is to work with people's mindsets, habits, and behaviors, how they handle their money. So that way they can pass that down through their generations. And you have your practice set up to help people who have done well create lasting generational wealth through what you do. So, what do you love most about what you do as an estate planner?
I love seeing the relief, the sense of peace of mind that the clients get when they actually sign things, right? When they understand what they're signing and they actually see how it would work.
Mhm.
I love it when we do multi-generational plans. So I've had clients where they bring their kid in or their children in for the meetings and they design it as a family and then everyone's on the same page. And they're just so relieved that if anything happens, it's kind of, they've got it covered.
Yeah.
Right. And so that idea that, because look, life happens. I mean, things change every second, like we have no idea what the future holds. Right. Um, but if something did happen, they've got it covered. I have one elderly client and that we did their plan, a little bit ago. And now her husband's starting to slip mentally,
Mm.
so she's dealing with all that. But she was kind of like, what can I look at the plan? I'm like, of course, it's your plan here. What do you need? And now she's comfortable because while she's dealing with that, which is itself bad enough, they've been married for like 60 years. It's amazing, this couple. Um, and so they've spent their entire life together. And so she's dealing with essentially this loss. What she's not dealing with is worrying about how to pay the bills,
Yeah.
worrying about making his decisions to help him medically. And it's really a nice thing because it's just so relieving. It just takes that pressure off so they can focus on what's important. And that's what's so rewarding about this work,
Yeah.
you know. So
So, what are some heartbreaking things that you see with what you do?
I see uh, families who just never get around to it. Families who, um, one client who was single and it, she just kind of waited, and then all of a sudden now she's sick, and then I get a call, and she wasn't doing really well. So all of a sudden, this now became her big concern because she knew that she wasn't doing well, and so now she spent her energy while she should be trying to get better, or while she's on her last days, and then she's focused on like, I need these documents done. And I'm like, that's probably not where you want to spend your life while you're sick, is focusing on your plan. But she never did it in advance.
Yeah.
And then this particular person ended up passing away. And then we couldn't get everything done the way she wanted because a lot of these things have to be done. It's like a big cautionary note. You cannot build an estate plan after you pass away. It has to be done while you're alive.
Yeah.
And so we got everything in place, but we couldn't get her trust funded, get everything into the trust in time. So people that she had like listed 20 years earlier, 30 years earlier, got a big portion of her wealth. Is
Mm.
that what she would have wanted? Probably not.
Yeah.
But there's no other way to fix it. We didn't have the time because she waited too long. And that's really the most heartbreaking thing, is if you can do it in advance, then all you have to do is update it and it becomes kind of easy.
Yeah.
They say for investing, the biggest mistake people make is they don't do it.
Yeah.
And then now they're 70 years old going, man, if I'd invested 50 years ago. And that's kind of heartbreaking, right? Like, oh, if you had, but I can't give you that time back. No one can. So that's with estate planning, similar idea, right? If you've done it earlier, and we all hope we live forever, and humans have this illusion that we're going to live forever, but of course, none of us do. So we have to get something in place, and then we don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it. Anyway.
So, what do you see the biggest reasons that the 60% of Americans who have no estate plan, what do you see their biggest reasons are?
I've heard a lot of things. I've heard, oh, well, if I do a plan, then I'm going to die the next day. And of course, that's not true. But almost every call I get is, I just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I know it's important. I know all this. I'm like, well, we have a process and I'll walk you through it. It's actually not that scary. It is a lot of work, but planning a trip to Disneyland is a lot of work, like, I mean, so it's kind of like anything in life is a lot of work. So it is work to inventory your life's wealth and your assets and prioritize what's important to you and your family. But it's really worth putting that effort in for 2 to 3 months to get a plan built. And part of what we do is just, let's go through from like literally the very first step, so you understand what it is you're doing. And then we walk them through that. But that biggest fear of, I just don't know where to begin, it becomes overwhelming. Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, let me be your guide, let me be your consultant as part of that journey. So it works out.
What would you say to those who say, well, I just don't have any assets. Like I'm not rich. I can barely pay my bills. Like, why would I need a trust or an estate plan?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, do an inventory and see what you actually own. You'd probably be surprised how high the number is. People say, I don't have anything, I don't have anything. And they do our inventory that we give them. They go, wow, I didn't realize I had that much. So I get that a lot. Like, yeah, exactly. And all of it needs to be accounted for because people don't realize everything has value. Like everything has value. So let's look at that value. But then let's say for the sake of it, you don't own a house, you're renting some, small apartment or something like that. Nothing wrong with that. It's just, you're just not in that place in life where you have a ton of assets. And I go, okay, so maybe you don't need the mega trust, multiple layer trust plan to protect all your assets for your blended family and your great grandkids and all that stuff. Fine. Okay, great. So you're single with nothing. I go, but so when you talk about estate plan, what are you talking about? Because it sounds like for those people, they say, well, I don't really need a plan. I'm like, but you're talking about a death plan, not an estate plan. Because a good estate plan will cover things you haven't thought about. For instance, you're in the hospital for 6 months. And if you go in the hospital, we all assume you're going to get better. So we're not talking you dying, we're talking you getting well again. But someone's got to cover for you. Someone's got to run your business. Someone's got to make sure that all your bank accounts and your house doesn't go into foreclosure, whatever it is. So that's a good part of a good estate plan is what's going to happen even if you're in incapacity. I've had kids in their, not kids, but younger adults in their early 20s. Well, I just graduated college. I don't have anything. And I'm like, okay, so you're in the hospital. Do you want your mom going through your text messages? Like, what's it going to look like? Let's get into that. If you're, they go, oh, I don't want that. Right. So let's get a power of attorney. It's the Britney Spears problem. She was in her 20s when she was declared incapacitated. And I would argue for good reason. She had a series of well-documented mental breakdowns. Someone needed to handle her estate, which was pretty large, of course, at that point. And so her father stepped in and took her power away from her. Mm-hmm. Then the biggest issue was never gave it back. And so we got the Free Britney movement and everything else, right? Yeah. Don't let someone take your control and your power away from you. You decide in advance at every stage of life over the age of 18, what's going to happen to your life if you're not there to manage it, even if you're not dead. And that's a conversation I would have with someone who says, well, I don't really have anything. Okay. I bet you do. Mm-hmm. I bet you do have things and people you care about. I bet you do have things you want to manage a certain way. That's what a good estate plan does. It's a death plan and an incapacity plan. And it really gets into the nuts and bolts of how you want to live, how you want to recover. Your medical directives, let's say you're a vegetarian and you don't want any meat. If you're incapacitated, you want to write that down. Like all these little details you can cover that are important to you and you write it down in advance. And so it's done for you and your wishes will be honored. Otherwise people are just guessing. Yeah. So anyway.
John, I love how excited and how passionate you get about the work that you do. Like you could just see your heart for people. So where are you licensed and how can people work with you?
Sure, that's great. I'm licensed, like I said, DC area. So I'm licensed in Virginia. So, and although I live in DC, I can do kind of anywhere in the Commonwealth, just Zoom calls are fine. I'm licensed in the district, so anywhere in the DC area. I'm licensed up in New Jersey, but I don't really do a lot of work there. But I'm part of a network nationwide of what's called personal family lawyers. You can go to personalfamilylawyer.com and kind of see about 400 of us kind of nationwide that all kind of practice this way. For me personally, for my firm, we're at legacylawyers.org. So the .com was taken, so I took .org. And yes, it's legal. Rules allow for-profit companies like mine to use .org now. So it's legacylawyers.org. And you can reach me personally at John's first name, John, at legacylawyers.org to reach out to me. And then I'll get you in touch with I don't like the word admin, so we call them client services directors. So I have a CSD, and then he can talk with you a little bit more about that stuff and we can get you squared away. So.
And do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up today's episode?
No, probably the biggest thing is just do it. I mean, for whoever's watching, whether you're in the far corners of a deployment or whatever in the globe, just do it. Spend the time and do it. Because the biggest mistake people make is they just don't do it. And then some kind of catastrophe strikes and then people are left scrambling. Their families are left scrambling. So estate planning is kind of like a love letter to your family, right? So write the love letter, get it done. Talk to someone, call me, and I can even point you in the right direction. If it's not me, but I feel strongly that pretty much everyone needs some sort of an estate plan out there. So that'll be my parting thought.
That's a great way of looking at it. An estate plan is your last act of love for your loved ones.
It's true. Yeah.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining me today on Tracy's Tuesday Talks. Everyone, thanks for listening in today. I hope this was helpful for you. And please reach out to John if you've got any questions or you would like to work with him for creating a plan for your legacy. Thanks, guys. Have a blessed day.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Tracy.